Once upon a time, I filmed an entire video telling you, my BellTube family, exactly what I was most anticipating to read in 2024. And then the camera died. Here we go for round two. Hey everybody, welcome back to BellTube. I'm Brian Bell, and today I want to share with you 10 of the most anticipated reads I have for next year in 2024. These are all coming from a wide variety of genres within the fantasy and science fiction realm. I'm sure there's probably going to also be some nonfiction that I throw in during the year, but as I looked at what I call TBR Mountain, which is my Goodreads list of all the books that I eventually want to get to, these 10 really stood out to me as priorities for 2024. We're going to start with the first book, and that's Demon in White by Christopher Rocchio. It's book 3 in the Sun Eater series. I'm about 70% done with Howling Dark right now. I'm loving it. It's really, really good. I will say Howling Dark is noticeably different to me as a reader than Empire of Silence. And there's reasons for it. I'll probably do a little bit more of a dedicated video that speaks to some of the similarities that I find in the Sun Eater series with Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. I think that there's some definite similarities, particularly about midway through Howling Dark. And what I've noticed about the Sun Eater is that it requires some concentration. I heard Christopher Rocchio in an interview the other day, and he was talking about creating art and wanting it to kind of last the test of time and last beyond himself. And I think that's exactly what he's doing here in the Sun Eater. That requires a little bit more concentration than some of the more kind of casual reads that are more not necessarily fun reads, because Sun Eater is fun, but just a little bit less dense and that you can fly through them. When I think of something like The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill, I love that series, but even like a 1,200 or a 1,600 page book by Ryan Cahill, I blast through that faster than I do a Christopher Rocchio book. It's just the writing is more dense. It doesn't necessarily make it better or worse. It just makes it more dense. And so it takes a little bit more time to digest it. That's the first book that I'm most excited to read in 2024. Moving on from there, the next book is from an author that I absolutely love, and I am shocked I haven't read this book yet. It's Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman, to me, is one of the most unique and fantastic storytellers of our day. I believe his works will last the test of time, and for whatever reason, I've just never gotten to Neverwhere. I think that the premise of it was somewhat spoiled to me a little bit, and I can't remember if it was on BookTube or if it was by Neil Gaiman himself. I did the master class on storytelling a couple of years ago that Neil Gaiman offers, and I think he was talking about the premise a little bit about Neverwhere. But nothing was spoiled so much that I don't want to read the book. In fact, I'm even more curious. American Gods is over there on the shelf. I read The Ocean at the End of the Lane earlier this year in 2023. There really hasn't been a giant miss for Neil Gaiman for me. He's written one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes. Sandman is an amazing comic, and of course the Netflix adaptation is completely blow away. I'm very excited for season 2 of that. So Neverwhere is the second book on this list of my most anticipated reads for 2024. Moving on, We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. This is the Last War trilogy. This is book 1, of course. It's a darling of BookTube. It's been talked about by Patrick, by Mike, by Tori, by lots of other BookTubers as well. And one of the things I hear quite a bit is that if you like Joe Abercrombie's writing, you're going to like the We Are the Dead or the Last War series. One of the reasons that I want to read this book so quickly and why I'm anticipating it so much is because I don't want it to get spoiled. It's being talked about quite a bit on BookTube, and I want to go in as blind as possible. That's a thing with me. I don't read the back of books very often, but I really don't want to know anything about characters. I don't want to know anything about plot. And other booktubers that I've trusted in the past have really said this is something that they enjoyed. I have no reason to think it's something that I won't. So the Last War series, and We Are the Dead specifically, is absolutely on my most anticipated read lists for 2024. The next book on my list is not fantasy. It's more of a thriller. I think it's a mystery. This was brought up in one of the videos, or actually a couple of videos, by a guy who runs the most widely watched, probably the greatest show probably the greatest television show in the universe. And that's Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, author of The Blackest Heart, author of The Lonesome Crown, The Five Warrior Angels. We've talked about them before. But a book that he's held up a couple of times is by Dennis Lehane, and it's called Small Mercies. This, to me, is exciting. I like mysteries, I like thrillers, but I don't do enough of them. And I trust Brian Lee Durfee so much that I know that this is going to be a great in-between epic fantasy books for me in 2024. I'm very excited to hit Small Mercies. The next book on my list is historical fiction, and if you would have asked me a year ago if I had any intention to ever read historical fiction, the answer would have been a resounding no. I'm a big fantasy and sci-fi reader. Historical fiction, to me, is like, well, why don't I just go read more regular literary fiction instead of historical fiction, if that's what I was going for. But when Mike over Mike's Book Reviews decided to read the Warlord Chronicles, I decided, okay, I'm going to give this a shot because I'm a big sucker for a King Arthur story. And Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles are some of my most favorite reads that I had this past year in 2023. And I've been hearing a big buzz again on BookTube about Pillars of the Earth. This book came out forever ago by Ken Follett. But again, I trust a lot of the booktubers out there, and if they're telling me that it's resonating with them, I have no reason to believe that it won't similarly resonate with me. Pillars of the Earth is a highly anticipated read for me in 2024. The next book on my list is from an author that I've only read one book from, and that's Guy Gavriel Kay. The book itself is The Lions of Al Rasan. I read Tagana earlier this year, absolutely blown away by it. Guy Gavriel Kay's storytelling to me is next level. It's next level. The language is fantastic, but it's accessible. The plot doesn't really give you a whole lot of clues, at least in the one book that I read, of what outcomes might be. I'm a real big subversion of expectations kind of reader. I like when things that I think are going to happen don't happen, or they happen in a way that I never would have imagined them to. I got a lot of that in the other book that I read by Guy Gavriel Kay. So The Lions of Al Rasan is something I'm really excited about reading. Guy Gavriel Kay is another author that, but for BookTube, I may never have come across. I'm very excited to read The Lions of Al Rasan in 2024. The next book on my list is called The Voice of War by Zach Argyle from the Threadlight series. I don't know anything about it. I know Zach Argyle is a huge proponent of indie books. I know he's done a whole lot in the BookTube community. I watch Bookborn's channel when she's on. It's good stuff. I have no reason to think that that trilogy isn't going to be for me. Once again, there's so many booktubers out there that I know that have already read it, that have found great affection and great love for it. So The Voice of War and the Threadlight series is a series that I'm very excited to get started with in 2024. The next book that I'm excited about, and would you believe it, I actually have a physical copy. I bought this book on Amazon last week after hearing the author John A. Douglas on the Beard of Darkness's channel. So this is The Black Crown, which is the Age of Adventures book number 1. I'm very excited about this. It seems right up my alley. It seems like it's a D&D sort of orc-based adventure. Well, I guess adventure's in the name of the series, so it's got to be an adventure. This just seems like a really fun read to me. It's something that I'm excited to read because as I look at my TBR for 2024, there's some pretty heavy stuff in there. We talked earlier about Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth. I can think of nothing better than to finish a giant historical fiction book by following it up with a cool book about orcs on an adventure. This seems really cool. It's absolutely on my most anticipated 2024 reads list. The next book on my list was given to me and sent to me electronically by the author Nick Horvath. This is Sledge versus the Labyrinth. The premise is just way too cool for me to not be excited about. Like I mentioned, I generally like to go into books and book series pretty blind and unknowing of what it's about. But the way that this has been described to me, the guy's from Minnesota. All right, points there right off the bat. He's an anti-hero. I love anti-heroes. We're going to talk about Sandman Slim in a much longer, more dedicated video when we talk about the Sandman Slim series in urban fantasy. But besides that, I really don't know a whole lot about the Sledge universe. I really like the interviews that I've seen with Nick Horvath, and the premise of this book seems pretty cool. The book just sounds like a fun book, so I'm greatly anticipating a fun read with this, and it seems like this is only going to be book one in a whole adventure series, and sign me up, because if book one is as good as I hope it is, I've got a new favorite series on the way. The 10th book on this list, I'm very excited about. And I know that this particular author is not for everyone, but I've stated many times on this channel, wait a minute, many times? This channel is literally like a month old. How many is many? Oh, by the way, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. As I'd mentioned earlier in the opening, this is the second time I filmed this, and I actually did mention that early in the video on the last one that the world will never see because my camera memory stick died. But, yeah, anywho's.
If your power goes out, remain calm.
Please do like and subscribe. The 10th book on this list is by Gene Wolfe, and it is Earth of the New Sun. This is the follow-up book that he wrote several years after Book of the New Sun. I just like the guy's writing style. I anticipate reading his full catalog of work in the years to come. It's dense material, I get it, and I get Gene Wolfe's not for everybody, but there's just something about, I call it reading a dream, and it's just really different. And so many times people say, well, Gene Wolfe, you got to be, thinking too much or that, or he doesn't give you answers and he leaves you wondering what's going on and he makes you trust him too much. I just don't buy that. I just think it's a different reading experience. And for me, when I read the Book of the New Sun, yeah, I didn't understand some of the things that were going on, but I don't think I was meant to understand some of the things that are going on. When we have dreams at night, it's our subconscious way of trying to give us some information, but it's not spelled out exactly what we need to do. And I feel like, in a way, that the Book of the New Sun was a little bit like reading a dream. So I anticipate Earth of the New Sun to be a little bit more of the same. I enjoyed it tremendously. My only regret with Gene Wolfe is that it took me this long in life to get to him in the first place, but I'm really glad I did. I've gone back and seen interviews with him in the 80s, and yeah, the video recording quality was terrible back then, but the guy was brilliant. And I love the fact that we have his legacy in these books. I'm really excited to read Earth of the New Sun. Maybe there's another booktuber out there that'll read it with me and we'll be able to discuss it. So those are 10 books I'm very excited to read in 2024. But as you know, we have to do one for the road. And today's one for the road is going to be about recording our accomplishments. I've talked many times about doing little tasks each day to get us to the eventual goal that we want to get to. They can be the smallest, most bite-sized things, but as long as they're moving us in the right direction, it's really useful. One thing that we also have to do is record those mini successes, because we're all going to have days where we think that the eventual goal is so far out of reach that the mountaintop is just too hard to climb. But when we record where we've actually gone each day, it's really helpful, and I know it's greatly beneficial to me to look back and see that there's a lot of little teensy tiny accomplishments that I know that if I go back a week or 2 weeks or a month or a year or however long back, I'm further down the road than I was, and that's useful to see in a physical way. At least it is for me. I hope it is for you too. Before we go, I just want to say a special thank you to all of you who've subscribed to the channel so far. We hit over 500 subscribers in our first 30 days of doing this. And when I say we, I mean us as a booktube community, as the BellTube community. I want to say thank you for that. I do believe we're on record pace to grow our channel as far and as fast as we want it to go. And here's your fortune.